Our topic for today's notes is industrial workers. So this goes along with the chapter of our textbook that raises an important question. We've learned about how this time period in American history was a period of great growth in industry, right? Big business comes about for the first time, and you get new products and new inventions that change life. And so there's a lot of positives happening. But the question that we're looking at here is, well, was that good for the American worker? And in some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. So we're going to take a closer look at the backbone of American industry in this time period, the people that were getting their hands dirty, doing the hard work. So one of the reasons that industry grew so quickly in America in the late 1800s was because we had a lot of people. Obviously, if you're going to create new businesses and new factories, you need a lot of laborers. You need a lot of people to work it, and we had that. During this time period, over 8 million people left their lives on the farms and moved to work in cities. Right? People saw that these new jobs are opening up, that they, maybe paid better or paid more than you could make working on the farms. And so lots of people are leaving their farm jobs to go take industry jobs, work in the cities. Another reason that we had so many workers was immigration. Between 1860 and 1900, around 14 million immigrants moved to the United States. So we've got a lot of workers, some of them from America, a lot of them from overseas that moved to the United States looking for jobs and opportunity. So what was it like? Well, working conditions were usually pretty bad. Child labor was pretty common. In fact, the picture you see here was one of a series of pictures by this guy, Lewis Hine, who took these pictures to expose child labor and how common it was and how dangerous it was. So lots of jobs, that's a positive, but the conditions weren't really the best. Factories were dirty and dangerous, very easy to get in accidents. Sometimes there were fires, and the bad conditions kept the fires going, and people weren't able to get out of the buildings. It wasn't the best conditions in which to work, that's for sure. So workers tried to do something about it. One of the ways that they approached getting better conditions was to set up labor unions, where whole groups of workers in an industry would join together and try to negotiate for better working conditions, better pay, better hours, right? Instead of having to work 60 hours a week, they might ask for 50 hours or even fewer. And that gets to the idea of sort of strength in numbers, right? One worker by himself or by herself can't really get much done. But if you've got thousands and thousands of workers joined together, you might be able to accomplish some change. But during this time period, labor unions ran into some issues. They ended up not being too successful because there were so many workers, right? If you joined together in a labor union and demanded change, it was very possible that the bosses might just fire you and replace you with new workers because there were so many laborers. Unions would sometimes try strikes, right, where they would go off the job, refuse to work until something was changed. But again, most of the times the strikes failed. Employers would sometimes bring in private guards, like the Pinkerton Agency, that we'll learn about at the Homestead strike. And sometimes even the police and even the U.S. Army were brought in to keep the peace and to keep conflict from breaking out. So even going on strike sometimes did not work. And it was also a big risk, because if you were a union leader, you might get blacklisted. Employers oftentimes just would not negotiate with labor unions, and if you were trying to lead a labor union, you might get fired, and employers would blacklist you, meaning they would make sure that other businesses knew you were a union leader, and other businesses would not hire you. So we would like to think that, labor unions stood up for change and got change, and sometimes they did, but this was a tough time period to be a worker, right? It was lots of jobs, but also some very difficult reality that they had to face every day, working in the factories and working in the mills.